Hello, everyone. If you are here to join us for the webinar, The Role of Youth and Civil Society in Shaping the MENA Energy Transition, you are in the right place. So we won't start quite yet, so we'll wait for a minute or two to make sure that all of you, even those of you who might be running a little bit late, can join the webinar from the start. And then we'll start the webinar as such. And then before that, I'd like to remind you of two things. So we are recording this session, and if you registered to be here, then you'll get an email with the link to the video recording and the presentations. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that this is your chance to ask questions. So if it's your first time, take some time to look at the toolbox, which is at the toolbar, which is at the bottom of your screen. And there you have a Q&A box, or questions and answers box, and you can pose your questions there to the speakers. So once all the speakers have delivered their presentations, we'll address some of your questions as well. And right, the other thing that we do here at ATA Insights is that we have a, you also see there is a chat box. So we encourage everyone in the chat box to let us know where they're joining from. So I'm here in Madrid, Spain, and so is my colleague Manuel, whom you can't see because he's behind the scenes, just making sure that everything is fine. But yeah, I encourage you to just let us know where you're joining from. Yeah, we'll wait for another minute or so, and then we'll get started. I will welcome Omar from Lebanon and Saeed from Jordan. It's the first to we have someone from Nepal as well, which is it's a very international webinar. So welcome all of you. I won't be able to give a personal, to mention each of you personally, but welcome and thank you for attending this webinar. Right, so I think now it'll be the right time to start. So before we start, I'd like to get each of our panelists to introduce themselves. So shall we start with, let's start with Sonia. Sonia, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, thank you, Carlos. My name is Sonia, and I work as an associate professional with the costing team at IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency. But today I will be mainly speaking about the work that I've done with FES and German Watch, where I worked with a group of young professionals to write the policy paper, and Ikram is actually one of these young professionals. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Nuhat, would you mind introducing yourself briefly, please?
Hello, this is Nuhat Awad. I'm from Lebanon. I would like only to say about myself, I am a climate activist. I have a master's degree in environmental sciences, and I have been attending Conference of Parties under the UNFCCC since COP21 in Paris in 2015. Currently, this is my last month as a regional coordinator at Climate Action Network in the Arab world, and I've been and I'm very happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nuhan. Then, well, Karim, if you can introduce yourself briefly, please. Karim, your microphone was on mute yet.
Hi everyone, my name is Ikram Hamdi Mansour and I am from Algeria. I am an earth architect, which means I only use natural materials for building. I'm also founder of Climate Change, Culture Change, which is a cultural project that aims to raise awareness of environmental issues through art and culture. And today I will be presenting with Sonia our work, which is a policy paper that we have done the last year with FES. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Bashar, if you can introduce yourself briefly as well, please.
Good afternoon. This is Bashar Zaytoun, and I'm based in Amman, Jordan. And I work on developing sustainable development policies to help institutions and groups translate sustainable development principles into practical programs.
Great. Thank you very much, Bashar, for the brief introduction. So now I'll give the floor to Karim, who will be the first one to present.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. Today we're going to present, Sonia and me, our work. We are a part of youth group from the MENA region, and we are active in energy and climate. So in this regard, as introduction to this webinar, we have came up with a policy paper in energy and climate to recommend MENA governments how to achieve and adjust energy transition and climate action. So the policy paper was a result of the work of 12 youth from across the Arab region. It was cooperation between Friedrich-Ebert Foundation and German Watch. So through this project, we had a vision. We wanted to raise youth voices and empower them in energy and climate in the MENA region. So the paper focuses on 5 topics. I will be presenting 2 of them. So what we have done is for each topic, we try to define challenges that the region is facing, and we suggest some recommendations. Actually, this paper was written the last year. So before the crisis, before the health crisis, COVID-19. So what I'm gonna try to do is to reflect some of our recommendations on opportunities of the recovery post-COVID, in my opinion. So the first topic that I'm going to talk about is regional dependency on fossil fuels. So the past 50 years, the MENA region has played considerable role in the global energy dynamic. It has more than half of the world crude oil and more than a third of its natural gas reserves. The region accounted for 37% of crude oil production and 22% of gas supply globally. And at the same time, the MENA countries are themselves rapidly growing, which estimated increase in energy related to greenhouse gas emissions in the region 47% by 2035. So the MENA region can be classified into 2 main categories, as shown in the graph. So we have the blue one, which is the net energy exporters. It includes GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council countries, and Iraq, Iran, Algeria, and Libya. These countries have large oil and gas. It's the net energy importers. It includes all countries on southern and eastern coast of Mediterranean Sea, except Algeria and Libya. And these countries depend on energy imports. So the challenges that exporters countries are facing is they are economically dependent on fossil fuels. So in this past few weeks, as the coronavirus has spread beyond China to the MENA region, commodity prices have been in free fall. So the region now has to face a dual shock, one from the coronavirus pandemic, to respond to health emergency, and the other one is a collapse of oil prices that will hurt directly oil exporting countries. So in the same time, these countries experience depletion of oil reserves. They usually have subsidized energy, which represent a huge burden on governments, and they have less motivation to install renewable energy. So the concern important countries, the high costs and volatile fuel prices affect both citizens and the private sector, and slow economic growth. Supply is affected by internal and external political conflicts and policies, which made it harder to achieve energy security. And here I would like to highlight the example of Jordan gas crisis that occurred when Egyptian gas pipelines were damaged in attack in 2011. And in this case, Jordan was forced to buy more expensive fossil fuels alternatives such as diesel to generate its electricity. As such, pipelines serve as an easy target to destabilize a region's economy, while the renewable energy sources are much safer. On the other hand, horizontal irrigation levels in the MENA region are very high, which means that the region has attractive and feasible solar energy potential. Furthermore, wind speeds in a specific localization, as shown in the figure, are suitable for wind generation projects. So from here, we can understand that the MENA region possesses a large natural potential for solar and wind energy. The recommendations that we suggest, first of all, is to deploy more local renewable energy resources in the following way. So allow and encourage household and commercial consumer to install renewable energy systems such as photovoltaic installation or turbine winds. Provide a safe investment environment and facilitate financial mechanisms for renewable energy projects through international or national banks. Manufacture renewable energy technology component locally to create jobs. And because of this health crisis, there is a disruption in the supply chain in renewable energy technology and every market, which makes more sense to invest in component locally. The second one is to implement subsidy reforms. The third one, like we all have seen how the oil prices have dropped down this last weeks, so they are unstable, which make decoupling fossil fuels from the economic growth model obvious, and it can be done through investing in other sectors such as agriculture or tourism. Deploy a clear plan for the energy transition, and it has to be in a specific time frame. So we should not let this crisis actually changing our plan for the energy transition, but it should motivate the other countries to set plan and make it happen faster. And the last recommendation is to establish better regional cooperation between net exporters and net importers to achieve regional energy security. Concerning the second topic, which is energy as catalyst for socioeconomic development, so the challenges that we define is that the MENA region, the MENA countries are 50% more energy intensive than the world average per unit of GDP. This can be attributed to several causes, such as lack of awareness of the importance of energy conservation, also the lack of energy efficiency building regulations such as lighting or heating system. There is also energy intensive transport sector with private cars culture that we have here, and underdeveloped public transportation system, heavily subsidies energy, leading to overconsumption and energy efficiency. So for this topic, the recommendation that we suggest, first of all, is to incentivize the adoption of energy efficiency and capacity building through training of local experts on energy auditing, raising awareness campaign through media and school curricula focused on energy conservation, market reform by allowing private sectors, companies, and individuals to participate in the power generation and distribution market, initiate carbon taxing and mandatory energy auditing, enhancing transparency and encourage trustworthy investment in the energy sector and to overcome corruption in the region, develop transport sector by incorporating and deploying electric buses in public transportation. And actually, from here, I think that this crisis, this health crisis is giving us two choices. Either we can continue for several decades in polluting, ineffective, carbon-based and unsustainable model development for both human and nature, or we can take the opportunity to accelerate the shift for low carbon energy and transport, which will bring long-term economic benefits. So today we have some alternative solution, which was not the case during the financial crash of 2008. As we have worked on these recommendations, there are experts, professionals, and activists who have done the same. So I strongly believe that this is the right time to create change, because we have seen that through this crisis that is politically possible and socially acceptable to draw a new perspective for public action. And I dare to dream big. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ikram, for your presentation. And also, you know, I mean, normally I leave the comments for after the all presentations are done, but I'd like to add that it seems that, you know, this crisis highlights a need for renewable energy and for cleaner modes of transport and power as well, because there seems to be a link between the spread of the coronavirus and air pollution. So, you know, it should reinforce the impetus that was already there to transition to renewable energy. So I'll stop there and I'll give the floor to Sonia, who is next up. Sonia, please start presenting whenever you're ready. And your microphone is on mute as well. So.
All right. I think now it's good.
It's if you could change it to full screen,
yeah,
that would be perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Well, over to you.
So thank you, Ikram, for elaborating on the first two topics of the paper. I will be talking more about the three topics that are renewable energy deployment and energy efficiency strategies for climate change mitigation and adaptation in the MENA region. The second topic is society for energy and climate justice. And lastly is achieving renewable energy in conflicted situations. As a start, one of the main challenges that are facing the MENA region is the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, so they can meet the targets of the national determined contributions, the NDCs. And the region has witnessed a tremendous increase in the amount of CO2 emissions in the past 10 to 15 years. So in order to decarbonize or in order to reduce the CO2 emissions, it's really important to decarbonize sectors such as power and transport, because they are the two main contributor sectors to the CO2 emissions. And the best way to achieve such desired amount of decarbonization, it's by increasing the share of sustainable energy. Now, two of the main challenges that are highlighted in this paper for this topic are the first one is the structure of the energy markets in the MENA region, and it's very special because we have powerful oil companies that hinder and block rapid renewable energy transition because they lose revenues in such energy transition. So government, they would need to spearhead these efforts. But the only issue that most of these companies are actually state-owned. The second challenge is the lack of financial means to enable energy transition, the lack of sustainable, reliable, and dedicated funds in the MENA region that represents a barrier to stimulating and encouraging sustainable energy markets. So the lack of financing is usually or is mainly due to the high investment risk in the region, and as well as the lack of expertise from local small and medium-sized enterprises, the SMEs, and also the local banks in promoting and assessing the viability of sustainable energy projects. So part of the recommendations that the youth came up to suggest for policymakers is that governments, they need to encourage SMEs to revive and develop sustainable energy economics. One example is to incentivize the private solar rooftop projects or panels locally in these countries. And for example, in Jordan, my country, there is a very successful example, which is JREEF. It is a fund that was established in response to meet the energy needs of the country through renewable energy. Other recommendations such as joining NDC partnerships and initiatives that are aimed to fostering NDC targets. And for now, only Morocco has proven its commitment in this cause and moved forward with climate change and energy goals. Moving to the second topic, which is societies for energy and climate change. Now, climate change is an ethical and a political issue, equally related to human rights, as it is to also to gender equality, as it is to environmental issues. So social injustices, they arise from unequal quality of life, access to resources, and application of human rights within our communities. And if we look at it, it's the vulnerable and economically weak societies that had little to no historical contribution to the mass industrialization of our present. They are actually suffering the most from the injustices that are arising from it. When we talk about the MENA region, the lack of sustainable development and the abuse of natural resources, well, especially in oil-rich countries, it jeopardizes the future of the younger generations, and thus it actually causes energy injustice or climate injustice. Talking about climate injustice, it's really important also to look at it from a gender perspective, because women and girls are most affected by climate change due to the fact that they are more likely to experience poverty and they have less socioeconomic power than men. And according to the United Nations, around 80% of people that were displaced due to climate change, they were actually women. So as such, to achieve social justice, these vulnerable communities and groups, they should remain the main focus and center of all the policies that are being established. And this is where we try to attract the attention of policymakers to consider these groups. And one really important point is one of the drivers for social injustice in the region is the energy education. And energy education in the region is almost non-existent. And this actually explains why we have the lack of civic engagement and activism in energy and injustice and awareness of climate change. But I will leave this topic to our colleague Nuhad as an expert. She will elaborate more on how civil engagement is very important. Now, as recommendations, the youth or the group recommended to establish energy laws and policies that consider energy from primarily an ethical rather than an economic point of view, and to include energy and climate justice as guiding principle for these policies. It's also very important to enable NGOs to effectively engage the society in decision making and allowing them access information, transparency, advocacy, and consultancy. Now, one really important point is, again, to reform the education system to include topics like health resource management, environmental responsibilities, and energy conservation. And this will actually allow the younger generation or younger citizens to learn how to live sustainably and develop sustainable habits, and also to support equally access and control and distribution for benefits of men and women. Moving to the last topic. Now, the MENA region is currently beset by conflicts in Sudan, Palestine, Syria, Yemen, and Libya, which is unfortunately has caused thousands of deaths or even more, and displaced millions of people in the past decade. These nations, in these countries of conflict, energy access, it represents the main challenge to recovery. The lack of energy access can disrupt socioeconomic development and push millions of people into unemployment and thus into poverty. We have two examples here. For example, in Sudan, only 57% of the population, they have access to electricity. Another example, in Gaza Strip, since 2007, 1.9 million people are living under very strict blockade with limited electricity access. It it gets to a 4 to 6 hours of electricity access every day, and sometimes that's actually cut by half. We're also very familiar with the civil war, the Syrian civil war, and how it caused the refugee crisis, and also in neighboring countries. So I'm not going to go into details in that, but we also need to look at the challenges that are facing these conflicted countries. We have also that they actually rely heavily on energy imports. That's one of the main challenges to satisfy their socioeconomic needs. Moreover, when it comes to climate change, as temperature rises and droughts, floods, and other extreme weather conditions, they only exacerbate these conflicts. In fact, many experts, they claim climate change as a catalyst for the conflicts in these war zones or war regions, and I strongly agree with this claim. Well, in regards of like renewable energy can act as an enabler in to lead these countries towards self-sufficiency and resilience. Now, part of the recommendations is again technology transfer to support SME and startups, local companies, so they can finance their own renewable energy projects. This will actually increase the competition in the market and create new job opportunities. Furthermore, to establish new specialized educational majors, vocational institutions that will lead also to technology transfer. So in conclusion, the paper has demonstrated on how us, the youth from the MENA region, envision the change for better policies that enhances climate and social justice in the MENA region and hopefully globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for your presentation. I'd like to remind the audience that you can pose questions through the Q&A box, and that we will discuss them after all our presenters have delivered the speeches. And next up we have Bashar. So Bashar, whenever you're ready, you can see you're already sharing your screen. And if you turn it to full screen, there we go. Perfect. Over to you, Bashar. Your microphone is on mute, by the way. Perfect.
Thank you, Carlos. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm excited by the high turnout. It means that people during this difficult time are willing to engage, are seeking answers to what our economies, what our energy world is going to look like in the next year or two. I will share with you two reflections today. In the first one, I'll just talk about what this paper means, what is trying to tell us, what are the takeaway messages that we can take away from it. I'm having problem navigating. Okay, here it is. So what are the takeaway messages? What's this paper trying to achieve? And there are three themes that have resonated with me. And probably with each one of us, there are different other themes that you can think of. But from one perspective, this is a very clear and loud message to our policymakers in this region, that our current energy policy regimes are no longer an option. They're becoming untenable. And the authors, the paper does a good job explaining why this is so. It's telling us that our over-dependence on fossil fuels to generate income, to derive tax revenues from them, is allowing us to pay a high price moving forward. And the paper goes through a list of consequences that were just presented to you. You can add more to this list: inefficiencies, lack of public transportation, which mostly hurts women and the young. Air pollution and contribution to climate change is another factor, and on and on and on. Just one example to demonstrate to you the lack of fiscal stability that can result from this. In 2016, subsidies, energy subsidies by Arab countries alone reached $70 billion that year. These investments could have gone into education, into public health infrastructure, into research development, etc., etc. On the left side of this chart, we have the loss in state oil revenues that is currently taking place. Our oil exporting countries are losing about $500 million per day in lost revenues. So it remains a question to see whether with borrowing and with budget deficits, whether how Arab countries are going to deal with this crisis moving forward and how they're going to address subsidies in light of deficits over the next few years at least. The second theme that for me was also loud and clear, the paper does a great job in a very simple way by covering 5 different topics. It's really telling us how difficult, how incredibly difficult and complex the process of making energy policies. An energy policy, a successful one, needs to attend to a diversity of goals, many of which are in tension. So the message, and the paper does a great job sending this message in very precise, simple language by covering these 5 topics. And the message here for policymakers is you need to take complexity into consideration. You need to look at systems and how systems interact. And climate change and today's pandemic is one type, the type of problems that we are going to live with. They're going to stay with us for many, many years. And unless we incorporate complexity in decision-making and policy-making, our solutions are not going to help. The third theme that jumped at me has nothing to do with the content of the paper, but has more to do with the profile of the authors. And I'm talking about the voice of youth. If we're thinking about mega trends today, let's think globally for a minute. Youth have been taken to the streets, climate change strikes by high school students last year, those of us who were following this. And they're telling us something. These are strong messages, and we hope our policymakers can listen to this. In the MENA region, the power of youth is even more pronounced. We have 2/3 of our Arab population in the MENA region is under age 30. These people are going to own the future. They have aspirations, and they're not being met. They would like to participate in the political lives of their societies, in policy making, in their economic and social lives. And right now, there is marginalization. And this doesn't bode well for this region. It hasn't been actually a few months away. If we go back to September, October, November of 2019, when Arab youth took to the streets, demanding equality, representation, transparency, accountability in Lebanon, Iraq, Algeria, the Sudan. So this is, again, another message to policymakers that you had better listen to youth. They have demands, they have aspirations, and they would like to shape the future they're living in. Before I move to my second reflection, let me just take this, share with you this quote. Of course, think tanks have written a lot about Arab youth, and this is one report from the European Union, and I will just read you the first quote. It's very indicative of what's going on. Young men and women are not sufficiently involved in the policy cycle and find themselves trapped as an observer status with no opportunity to shape policy outcomes in the region. And I think this sums in very nicely the situation that we have. And this is where the power of this paper comes in, I think. Before I move to my second reflection, actually, let me just pose this question to you, and feel free in the next 10, 15 seconds to write your comments. What jumps at you for this paper? What makes this paper different? I know many of us work in energy, are familiar with a lot of the themes raised in the paper, but what jumps at you? What makes this paper different from anything else? And I'll give you 5 seconds now before I share my perspective. And you can write your comments in the chat box. I think it is an interesting example of youth demanding meaning in their lives. They are demanding to take ethical principles more seriously in policy making. And you don't see very much in our today's policy journals, you don't see a lot of talk about this. Remind you, these are not young people who are thinking in a closed place in idealistic terms. These are things that they feel strongly about, and they are seeking meaning in life, and they are seeking for their public life to be anchored in ethical principles and values. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone out to the streets sacrificing their lives in Baghdad or Beirut or Sudan or other countries. So this is really what jumps at me, and these are some quotes from the paper. Moving on to the second reflection, what's our renewable energy world is going to look like post-COVID-19? I don't have the answers to this question, and I would be fooled to really make any predictions because next week they're gonna prove to be wrong. I can offer some observations. Right now, most countries are busy putting forward economic recovery packages in tens of billions of dollars, and I don't think green tech or green energy is going to factor big in these initial set of policies. Let's first look at this chart here. As you know, localized cost of energy has been going down for solar and wind. For solar, it has come down by 89%. For wind, the cost has come down by 70%. So economics is not an issue now. So what is the issue? What is preventing us from making this transition to more renewable sources of energy? So that's a question to be posed. This is a list of economic recovery plans that have been proposed by a number of Arab countries, as you can see. And as I said, in this first round of recovery packages, I don't think people are going to think about their carbon footprint. I think most of the money is going to go to just to get people back to inject some money in the market, help the most marginalized, get the economy started again. But I don't think we're going to see money spent on green energy. In the second or third round of packages, which I think they should be coming, in the long term, I think we can advocate and see more voices pushing to include green energy. Whether this is going to happen or not, I do not know. It doesn't look very promising right now. Looking at the US and Europe, lots of groups and institutions are pushing for green deal, green recovery plans, and it hasn't really worked in their favor yet, but we have to wait and see. I mean, there's a lot is going on, and we have a priority to focus on what's in front of us, fighting this pandemic, enforcing the public health infrastructure, but remains to be seen in the long term what will happen. What may happen, or what's really happening right now for those renewable energy projects that have already been started or will start, I think the challenge now is recovering of the supply chain. It's going to take some time for the supply chain to recover. And once that's up and running, we can see more activity, restoration of these projects online. Here in the MENA region, there is a lot of work in front of us. As you can see, the share of renewable energy in total final energy consumption has been declining actually over the past few years. And that's because most of the demand in energy has been met by fossil fuel sources. So you can see the difference between renewables and fossil fuels, and the opportunity is there. And again, it remains to be seen how countries are going to handle the pandemic and how they're going to handle the next 2 to 3 years of economic recovery. Moving forward, the name of the game now is resiliency. Based on this experience with COVID, based on climate change. So what I'm suggesting here these are warning signs for our policymakers that we believe they ought to heed and listen to as they plan for their economy moving forward over the next, not just few years, but over the next decades. So this crisis has proved that air pollution reduces your resiliency, as evidenced by the number of, by how easier it is to be exposed to the virus if you suffer from air pollution. And we know that Arab cities, urban centers in the Arab world, in Cairo and Beirut and Damascus and Sana'a and Riyadh, always rank very high in terms of air pollution. Energy infrastructure, is it built to adapt to climate change? What if we have heat waves? What will happen to our thermal energy plants? And I don't believe they are adapted, or I don't think they can adapt to any future any future climate change effects such as heat waves. Finally, what we're seeing now, climate change is going to generate crises in the future, not unlike our current COVID-19 crisis. We already know that geography of human disease is changing. We already know that agricultural pests are moving with vectors to areas that are areas that have higher temperatures. And we know, as our permafrost is thawing in Siberia and northern Canada, we don't know what kind of microbes are buried under there. And we don't know how many pandemics can be caused once these microbes are released into the atmosphere. So these are all warning signs, I'm putting them, for our policymakers to learn from them and learn how they can factor resiliency and complexity in their decision-making and changing the way they think about our energy future. Moving, and finally, based on these facts, I would imagine that we need to engage in more collective thinking about how to change our advocacy models. A lot of us are engaged in as disruptors, as social agitators, by publishing this kind of paper that we have today and others. They're active online in social media, but I think we need to move or consider how to be initiators of actions and implementers of change on the ground. We cannot leave our fate in the hands of our policymakers. We have to get to work ourselves. So I'll stop here and I'll be happy to engage people with questions.
Well, thank you very much, Bashar, for your presentation. I think you've made quite a few statements there with impact. You know, if I can summarize, so air pollution does make you more, well, less resilient, more vulnerable to, you know, pandemics such as COVID-19, and renewable energy can help in fostering resilience. So it's an important thing. And I'll stop there because we have a high number of questions. So we have like 15 questions here, and we'll they are addressed to you know, to you who are the experts with us. And I'll start with a question that mentions whether renewable energy could be part of the economic recovery of the after the post COVID-19. And I don't know who wants to start.
I'll give it. I mean, this is what we are calling for, and I think this is what this paper calls for. The question is it going to happen? And we don't know yet. So far, it doesn't look good. As I said, in this first set of economic recovery packages, I don't think we're going to see a lot of renewable energy projects. Looking into the long term, it's very likely. As people reflect on their experience, reflect on the requirements for resiliency, what it would require, if they since COVID-19 and climate change are very similar in many ways, this ought to push policymakers to give more consideration to accelerate the introduction of renewable energy. As I said, the chart I showed you shows that we have a lot of work there. So in the short term, no, I don't think carbon footprint is going to be a high priority in the short term or even the medium term. Long term, it remains to be seen, and we ought to push for it, or those who are interested ought to push for it.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else want to add anything? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question, which is whether, well, we have all seen how oil prices are falling off a cliff, really, and they're lower now than they have been. We have some of the lowest historical prices now. So do you worry that this will slow the deployment of renewable energy? Not all at once.
Anybody wants to answer? I mean, I'll give a quick one. Again, I'm very reluctant to really predict what will happen. It's just too early right now. I mean, yes, I think we're going with supply glut in the market, so much oil. I think in the short term, we're going to be relying on fossil fuels. Again, I think, you know, the energy infrastructure is difficult because it has a long lifetime. Energy facilities, power plants have 25, 30 years lifetime. Buildings have 100 years lifetime. So it's difficult to really expect changes quickly. I think what we can expect realistically is over the long term to increase investments into renewable energy and stop investments into fossil fuels and go through a transition period where we rely more on renewable energy and less on fossil fuels. I think this is all we can hope for. I cannot tell you what oil prices are going to look like at the end of this year or early next year. It's just too difficult. I just cannot provide these types of answers.
Okay, thank you very much, Bashar. And actually, we have, I'll give the floor to Nuhat, whose turn it is to present. And then please, Nuhat, over to you.
Hello, everybody. I'll be speaking about the role of civil society in climate action. And I will mention the role of youth and how we can empower youth in order to be part of the recovery and what are the available opportunities to recover from COVID-19. Please, next slide. I'm gonna start by talking about the situation and why we need to be sustainable, then pass through the problem of COVID-19, civil society role, and why we need the civil society and what are the barriers for the engagement of youth and civil society. Then I'll mention very briefly regional initiatives and what we can do post-COVID-19. Next, please. Currently in the Arab world, there is around these recent numbers and statistics before COVID-19 says that around 30% of the Arab population is youth. So, and these young people, many of them are unemployed, especially in Arab war-torn countries. Unemployment rates might reach 45% of youth. So having this high number of youth and at the same time many of them is educated and many of them are unemployed, and having a internal migration due to climate change, there is expectation that by 2030, 2/3 of the world will be living in cities, and this migration from villages into cities will, and we as civil society have been in some countries a part of the political reforms and part of the economical reforms, especially in those countries that following participatory approach. So having all of this situation means that we as civil society need to work to have a sustainable future, need to take these numbers into consideration. Next, please. And when we say about creating a sustainable future, this means by creating sustainable cities that we can live in, cities that depend on renewable energy. When we say this, also we say that linking different SDGs into each other, like if you are working on climate action, which is SDG 13, that does not mean that you can work on SDG 7, which is renewable energy, and at the same time to incorporate technology in order to create jobs for these youth, and in order to achieve Agenda 2030, and in order to implement what our government had said and in their NBCs. Next, please. Now everybody is, or most of the countries are in a lockdown. Many of us are in their home. We see always stay home hashtag. This is due to coronavirus. Coronavirus, some says that it is from an animal resource, others says no, it's man-made. So I'm not going to discuss this, but if we stay like this, if we stay not having a solution for the wildlife destruction, if the fires stays and deforestation continues on, and we keep our lifestyles, we're gonna face more than COVID-19, endangering wildlife species and make them in contact with the human beings. That means we are opening the gate for more viruses to emerge and be in contact with it. And this will not allow us to take concrete actions. We had in 2015, our countries had said that they are trying to keep the temperature of the earth between 1.5 and 2 degrees. So these strong commitments and holding to climate ambitions and having this transformative change means that the economic stimulus packages that Mr. Zaytoun had talked about them need to include agricultural farming, protecting ecosystem, just transitions, especially for people that has lost their jobs or other people that are working on fossil fuels industry, and we are asking to keep the fossil fuels in ground. So this green transition need to be just. And also I'd like to emphasize about including loss and damage, because many people are still facing the effects of climate change, especially vulnerable people that are women and children in these areas. They are still having difficulties in getting water to their household. They are still having difficulties in securing their livelihood. So taking into consideration loss and damage, especially where there will be hurricanes or where there will be deforestation, or like people are losing their no more water in order to agriculture, this needs to be taken into consideration in the economic stimulus. Next, please. So we as civil society, we need to keep on pushing to have low carbon development strategies and policies. Yes, we know it's difficult. We know that people priorities now is health and staying safe, and the same for governments, and to keep the economic wheel, or like to invest money or to pour money inside the economy in order to keep it as it is. But this need for us to do awareness session and to talk to policymakers, to talk to people, to tell them, even if it's through webinars, to tell them that the response to COVID-19 is not separated from the response to climate action, because the adverse effect of climate actions will affect us more and will affect our health more, and even more, the impacts will be on the economy much worse. So, and we need to work as a watchdog for what our governments are working, and they need to follow a PPP, a participatory approach, to engage us in order to work on strategies that invest in green energy infrastructure and have real climate action. Next, please. We all know that civil society in the Arab region and youth had faced a lot of barriers before, and now due to COVID-19, we're gonna have more mobilization obstacles due to priorities, which is health now is the top of the political agenda and the top of the people's priorities. Moreover, economic growth. And as we see that the price of fossil fuels have decreased, which means it's much easier to use it rather than to invest in renewable energy for some governments. So our role here is to do awareness on the benefits of clean technologies to these different stakeholders. And at the same time, we're gonna still face difficulties in securing fundings for the projects that we are working on, especially that like in some countries where there is refugees. In the last 5-6 years, most of the fund was for projects related to refugees and their livelihoods. which was less funds for environment, and now will be more funds for recovery. So we need, as climate activists, to work and to show this link about the effects if we didn't do, and if we didn't work on being more ambitious, and if we didn't work to have fight climate change, we will be facing a lot of economical burdens, health burdens, and social conflicts. Next, please. There are some regional initiatives that I'm going to mention briefly. Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, they have a regional program on energy and the climate project, and they presented now, youth presented one of the papers done under this program. We have RES for Med, which is Renewable Energy Solutions for the Mediterranean. They are also part of RES for Africa. They are promoting clean energy solutions in South and East Mediterranean countries. We have Can Arab World that are working on just transition and renewable energy. And lately, after COVID-19, IRENA, International Renewable Energy Agency, agreed with the African Union to work closely to advance on renewable energy across the African continent. The RICRI has a very nice program and many other programs, which is a program for sustainable energy youth, where they train youth on different topics and empower them to work in the region on renewable energy. Next, please. And now we are a civil society. We need to be more united to push for our demands, to keep on asking to keep fossil fuels in the ground. And even if they are cheaper, that doesn't mean polluters don't need to pay for what they polluted. And COVID-19 didn't put the curve down. It only delayed for a certain amount of time the effect and the heating of the world, because the accumulation of greenhouse gas emissions is not due to 1 month or 1 year. It is a 20 years work of human industries and the human man-made greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere. So we need to keep on advocacy, on raising awareness to other members of civil society, to youth, and to other people on the importance of depending on renewable energy. Moreover, we need to think internationally and act globally. Each one of us in his own country and even in his own district has needs that are maybe slightly different, or maybe more than that different from the other needs. We need to go on ground, see what they are what are these needs, and meet them and meet these demands, and also ask our governments that all of these billions of dollars. Now, Mr. Zaytoun mentioned that a country is pouring $27 billion, and different Arab countries, each according to their economical, are adjusting some kind of money for the recovery of COVID-19. This needs to take the workers' health into consideration, and to be for rebuilding a better and safer zero carbon future. We cannot go back and keep the subsidies on fossil fuels and keep what we have been doing. This should be our way and our opportunity to change our lifestyle, to change our political strategies, and work in a holistic approach. Next, please. And we as civil society, some of our organizations are mostly like have their advisors and have been there for a couple of years. Others, it's a youth initiative, so we need to be the ones who support these youth by providing them tools and offering them access to our networks, and at the same time empowering each other. And here we need more targeted funding for these kinds of projects. And at the same time, we need, when we talk about investing in clean energy, to say that this will be working on being affordable. It has an economical aspect, and also we need to keep on asking to have and to adopt cost-effective standards for different technologies, and to expand the infrastructure and upgrade the technologies in our developing countries. Next, please. climate action. When we say about climate action, many of us say, okay, but COP26 is postponed. And even the intersessionals that were in June, now they are postponed till lately this year. But like COP26, regional climate weeks, all of them are for next year. Yes, that's true. But we are not a moment civil society. We are not people that are working for a conference. We have a cause. We are a movement. So this is the right time to have our own schedule, our own timings, and our own history points where we work for the things that we have been fighting for, rather than being on a wheel of the conferences that we need to go into negotiations and keep on following up on what's happening. And also, this is the right opportunity to ask and to work to have green jobs and to show the importance of implementing and investing in renewable energy for a sustainable future, and also to empower youth in order to be part of the writing policies, in order to be those ones that are working on the ground to implement the project and to have a good development. Next, please. Thank you.
Well, Nuhat, thank you very much for your presentation. Definitely food for thought there. And you know, we have in theory run out of time, but if everyone agrees, we can go on for another 10 or 15 minutes to answer some of the questions that the audience have sent. So the audience have been absolutely amazing. They have sent, you know, over like 30 questions or so. So yeah, let's start with the first one. So there have been a number of questions about the practical steps that could be taken to engage youth. And there was also a question on training programs for youth regarding renewable energy. Are you aware of any training initiatives that are happening, you know, in the MENA region that engage youth and get them to work or to just be more aware of renewable energy as it could be implemented around them?
I think I can answer that because I have an experience. But Nuhat, she actually mentioned the two programs. One of them is Enrique APSI program, and the other one is the program that eventually had this policy paper coming out of it. So when it comes to RICRI, it was an amazing internship program that I was part of it, and this is how I actually started my career in the renewable energy sector. Starting with them with the APSI program, it was a 6-month internship. I truly encourage everyone to apply for such internship program. As an IRENA also employee, I encourage everyone to keep an eye on all the internship opportunities that we are posting frequently. I believe there are some that are actually still receiving applications now. And also the FES always working on different fellowship programs. There was one that was very special for Jordan, and they came up with a policy paper that was very specific about the Jordanian situation, the Jordanian energy situation. And then the next one was our batch, where we worked pretty much on the whole region. So I encourage everyone to just apply and stay connected with us, the fellows. We can always help with recommending such opportunities.
Thank you, Sonia. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that.
Yeah, very quickly. There is a program here in Jordan called SEED, and they work with the young men in rural areas. They provide them with training, and these individuals become renewable energy ambassadors. So they go knock on doors, door to door, let people know about energy efficiency and renewable energies. And it's a hundreds of people have joined the program. It has been very successful over the past 3 years, and I know it has been renewed, but it's something to look at. It's called SEED.
Great, okay, well, thank you very much. So there you go. The question actually mentioned initiatives in Jordan. So there you go. There are a couple there. And there is another related question, which was about how can, and you know, I can see we have some young people in the panel. So you know, who I'd like to hear from you. So someone was asking, how can experts in renewable energy engage with youth in a meaningful way?
I can go. I have just a thought because considering the situation now and how we all started attending these webinars, and we know that the young people are very connected with the technology, so it's easier to reach out to young people through the internet and through webinars. So even just starting with such very short, brief introductions about certain topics, and then you will eventually collect your audience from the young people who are interested. And then there are many online courses that the expert can actually tailor around what the young people actually need in such regions. So it's very important to use the technologies that we have to reach out to as much people as we can.
Great, thank you very much. With Karim or Nuha would like to, do you have any ideas about how energy experts could engage with you and or with the youth community?
I would like to say that if you want to talk about climate action, we have Yongo, which is under UNFCCC, the youth constituency, that youth can be part of it, and they have different working groups. At the same time, youth can contact experts through their mails if they have any concern. And here I would like to ask them to have their own initiatives, and to if they don't have their own initiatives, or like they are not willing to have any social enterprise, maybe they can go and volunteer in the organizations that is working in their area and tackling these topics. So by volunteering and getting in contact with people and getting in contact with what kind of project is implemented on ground, this will build the relationships and will build the skills and will allow them to increase their network. In addition to, as mentioned, Yongo, we have the UNMGCY, which is the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth, and different bodies that they can be part of it. This is one of the thoughts that came to my mind.
Thank you very much, Nuhat. There was also a question about the role of education on energy efficiency. So, you know, is it something you have come across? What role do you think that awareness on encouraging energy efficiency could play in well, having a more resilient societies and more renewable energy?
Can I answer?
Please.
Okay. We in our MENA region, we found that if you are going to talk about education or energy, it's in university, while if environmental issues are mentioned maybe slightly in a couple of courses during schools. But if we want to build a aware generation, we need to start we need to teach these pupils energy efficiency, different aspects of climate change, greenhouse gases, different greenhouse gases from schools. And so maybe it's the right time to have education starting schools. And here I want to mention that some countries have made such projects, like how to incorporate different climate action terms into the curriculum, but till now there is nothing implemented. So maybe as civil society we can do contracts with a couple of schools where we go on weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, do awareness sessions for students, push for governments to have part of, to renew the curriculum where they can incorporate the new challenges facing humanity into education. Before being more technical, because universities are more for professional and technical issues, and this information needs to be as a common sense with between our people.
Right.
So I would like also to add. Yeah, I would like also to add something, like we can also, for example, the project that I am working on it, so it's like to raise awareness through art and culture. So I do believe that this like two discipline can really like change behaviors of people. So maybe we can, for example, the first activity of the project is like to is a training about ecological art. So, and here I was working with some experts. So it's like really to create an atmosphere where like youth and experts can exchange together. And like for me, the most important thing is to do is really like to try to not only like wait for the government to make changes, but like to change our behaviors through this climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, well, I'd like to, thank all of you, all the speakers and everyone in the audience for bearing with us. You've all been great in sending lots of questions, and it's been a very interesting webinar. We're coming to the end now. There is one question that I would like each of you to briefly comment on before we finish, because I think it goes straight to the heart of the whole question, which is, what can be done to encourage or to strengthen political will to implement more renewable energy in the MENA region? And I don't know who wants to start. So, Bashar, please, if you could start, just a thought.
I guess you need to pressure. Decision makers are public officials. By definition, they respond to pressure. That's their job. So citizens don't act, well, first of all, there was a question about experts. Don't expect answers from experts. Experts do not know everything. We should act as citizens, first of all, get organized, educate yourself about the issues, find your passion, find like-minded people, work in groups, never work alone. Working alone never works. Work in groups and apply pressure using creative methods, apply pressure on policymakers to make change. I'm not creative, I'm an old guy, but young people have the creativity. You have better ways, you can think of much better ways than I can, and find a way to apply pressure on policymakers.
Thank you very, very much, Basha. And then Sonia, you're next along the camera, so it's your turn.
Yeah, very well said by Bashar. And I'm just gonna add that when it comes to youth, as I am one of them, if you want change, you have to stay well informed and at least look for these opportunities. They just don't come to you. You have to look for them, apply, and try to get your voice to reach to policymakers. And it's not impossible. I know a lot of young people that they say, I mean, there's nothing we can do. It's all done somewhere up there. No, the change usually, like the change comes from the bottom. So I do encourage all the young people to look around and to see what kind of opportunities they have, and to actually create their own. There's a lot of fundings that support young people around the world, and especially in the MENA region, to start certain initiatives. And I know that Nuhad is very familiar with such fundings and initiatives. So just stay informed and keep looking for change. And like Bashar said, this is very important. Is to find people that have the same ideas and they share the same passion. That's very important.
Thank you very much, Sonia. And I'll repeat the question again briefly. So before giving the floor to Karim to answer, which is, what do you think could be done in practical terms to encourage politicians to act, essentially?
Thank you. So I would like just add one sentence that I really believe on, is that the most important voices are ours. So we need to be conscious that the opportunities are in our hands. So the thing that like youth can do a lot of things, and it can be with different initiatives, like to push to make pressure on the government. It can be, like I said, cultural project or climate action that we see with NUHAD, and we have a lot of options to put pressure on the government. So it's not like because they didn't do nothing, so we're gonna just wait for changes to happen. So we have a lot of how to say, like a lot of initiative that we can implement in our context. And the other point which is really important, like Sonia said, is to be well informed. It's super important to know the context where you are working, like to try to find a solution that can work in your region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karim. And Nuhat, what do you have to say about this?
First, I would like to thank Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung and the Climate and Energy Regional Project MENA for their support and for this webinar, supporting this webinar and allowing us to connect with youth. We need such initiatives to, especially in this time, to keep on having webinars on educating our fellows and getting educated for what others are being done, and keeping the connection in order to be unified, in order to see what's going around, and in order to understand more our demand and learn from the experience of others. And by having knowledge, we can raise our voices and ask for what we want. That doesn't mean that policymakers and decision makers will listen to us, but also we can use the voting. And we as youth, we are not going to vote for you if you don't work on climate action and renewable energy and take part in protecting our future. We can do this at municipality level, and it can build on to be maybe on a regional level. So as Sonia mentioned, we don't need to lose hope. We need to keep our confidence in ourselves and to trust our abilities and to work with the resources that we have. Maybe we can have an effect on the building that we live in, maybe on that school, maybe on the university, maybe on different rules. So to work up to our capacities and link with each other and push for the demands. And there is many things that happened in the region by youth led to change in policy. Maybe by, I want here to mention that in Lebanon, there was a policy where they prevented smoking in confined areas, and this was worked on by civil society. So we need to believe in ourselves, and this will happen one day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nuhat. And well, you know, once again, I'd like to thank everyone in the audience. I'd like to thank our speakers, and also I'd like to thank the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung and the Climate Energy and Regional Project in MENA for making this webinar possible. So we will send you the video recording and the slides as well. And so in about a couple of days. And well, I hope to see you here again in other webinars that we'll organize at ATA Insights. You can check them out at our website. Without anything else to add, well, I hope you all have a good day, and yeah, see you here next time. Bye.